This legit is maybe the most mind-blowing Bible fact I've ever learned in my entire life. I've been waiting 6 years to get this out because it never fits in a sermon.
And that's because what you're about to say is complete bullshit. You couldn't fit it in your sermon because you knew you were lying and you didn't want to lie to the people that you were preaching to. But it's clear you're comfortable enough to talk about it on a podcast, so let's go.
Jesus ascended into heaven when he was standing on, in Acts chapter 1, the Mount of Olives.
So real quick, this is not a first-hand account, second-hand account, or even a third-hand account. This is what's known as single-source literary construction. The only author who talks about it is Luke. Paul, Matthew, Mark, and John don't seem to know anything about it, so this is just not true.
In Acts chapter 1, he said, I'm going to come in the exact same way that I go. When Jesus returns and he descends, he's going to descend and stand right on top of the Mount of Olives again. If you're ever there on the Mount of Olives is east of the Temple Mount. So in Ezekiel 43, it's one of the passages that Jewish people for millennia have been like, that's a messianic prophecy.
And that is absolutely false. Ezekiel 40 through 48 has always been read as a new temple law code about the messianic age and not about the Messiah himself. It's about how the restored theocracy will function. In fact, the rabbis were so literal about Ezekiel that they almost banned it. The Talmud actually says that Ezekiel was almost banned from scripture because his temple laws conflicted with what the Torah says. So they were actually arguing about legal technicalities, not about spiritual meaning. You won't find Targum, Mishnah, Talmud, Midrash, Dead Sea Scrolls, Philo, or Josephus interpreting Ezekiel 40 through 48 as some divine or messianic prophecy. It's literally just about future temple laws.
Listen really close, bro. This is insane. Then the man brought me back to the outer gate of the sanctuary, the one facing the east, and it was shut. It is to remain shut because the Lord, the God of Israel, has entered through it. And when it says has entered through it, this is prophetic foreshortening, talking about a future event as if it were in the past.
So this guy has either never read Ezekiel, or he read it and the context went completely over his head, or, the context just didn't stick in his brain, or he read it, understands the context, but he's intentionally misleading or lying to you to try to sell you on the fact that this is some type of messianic prophecy when it's not, to try to bury you deeper into their cult. So what is the context of Ezekiel? Well, Ezekiel starts off by describing how Israel broke the covenant with God. Jerusalem is filled with corruption, violence, exploitation, priests are abusing the sanctuary, and idolatry is running rampant inside the temple itself. So God shows Ezekiel something shocking. The glory of Yahweh literally abandons the temple. Ezekiel 12 through 24 then describes how Jerusalem is destroyed. Babylon comes, the city is burned, the temple is destroyed, and the people are exiled. Everything that Ezekiel warned them would happen. Ezekiel 33 through 39, the tone shifts here. Now this is about Jerusalem's restoration. Israel will return, the land will be healed, the people will be given a new heart, a future ruler from David's line will shepherd them, and the nations surrounding Israel will be judged. This is what's known as the hope section of Ezekiel. Now in Ezekiel 40 through 43, God shows Ezekiel a future where the temple has been restored. It is a real, physical, sacrificial temple. So Ezekiel 43:1-5, the glory of Yahweh has returned to the temple through the east gate, which is the exact same temple that he left through earlier. So God has returned, the sanctuary is alive again, and the covenant has been restored.
Okay, now check this out. Zechariah 14:3-5. His feet shall stand upon the Mount of Olives, which faces Jerusalem on the east. And the Mount of Olives shall be split in two, from east to west, making a large valley. Half of the mountain shall move to the north, and half of it to the south. In 1964, look this up. There's a million news stories about this. These Jewish dudes want to build a hotel on the top of the Mount of Olives. They've got to get a geological survey done before they build on the top of a historic mountain. When they do the geological survey, they discover that there is a fault line that runs right underneath the Mount of Olives. It is an east to west fault line that runs right from the top of the Mount of Olives right to the east gate.
So again, this guy is misleading you or lying to you about Zechariah, because he's ignoring the context of Zechariah. Zechariah 12 through 14 is an end of exile restoration oracle. Zechariah 13 is about Judah being cleansed of idolatry, losing false prophets, being cut down and scattered, and reduced to a remnant. This is about the Babylonian exile. And in Zechariah 14, this is where we see Yahweh fighting for his people to restore glory to Jerusalem. Yahweh personally intervenes. He stands on the Mount of Olives. Cosmic geography changes. Living waters flow. And Yahweh becomes king of the whole earth. And the survivors return to Jerusalem. This is about restoration, theophany, and kingship. And the whole thing about the hotel, well, that's just silly. Geological evidence suggests that it was due to local instability, landslide scars, and ancient slumping slopes, not because of some newly discovered east-west fault line, because there isn't one. So Israel sits on what's known as the Dead Sea Transform, which is a major tectonic boundary between the African and Arabian plates, which is why historically there have been a lot of earthquakes recorded in the region. And the major tectonic plate runs north to south, not east to west. So back to Ezekiel, since God had entered through the gate, it has become sealed, holy, and restricted. So in Ezekiel, God had left through the temple gate, Jerusalem was destroyed, God returns through the same gate, the gate is sealed, and temple access laws are restored. This is not a messianic poem, not a Jesus prophecy. It just tells about how the covenant had been restored. And this can't be about Jesus, because in Ezekiel 45, the prince, who Christians believe is about Jesus, offers sin sacrifices for himself, is not sinless, is not divine, has sons and inheritance laws, loses land if he abuses power, and is subject to priestly law. And since temple law is being restored, Ezekiel commands animal sacrifice, sin offerings, blood altar rituals, priestly ordinations, festival calendars, grain offerings, and atonement sacrifices. Which means this cannot be about Jesus, because Christianity claims Jesus did away with all of that. But you know, I'm actually glad that this guy brought up Ezekiel, because that gives me an opportunity to remind you that in Ezekiel there is a story about a prostitute who lusts after men who are hung like horses. Good luck.